In this video, we explore the haunting case of Lauren Giddings, a young woman full of promise whose life was tragically taken by someone shockingly close to her. The story begins in Mon, a city in central Georgia, where we are introduced to 27-year-old Lauren, the oldest of three sisters, Sarah, Caitlin, and herself, born to Karen and Bill. Her family joked that Lauren's puppy, Butterbean, was the real star of the household, a sign of how tightly knit they all were. Lauren had long dreamed of becoming a public defender, and in the spring of 2008, she relocated from Maryland to Mon to pursue that goal. Lauren settled into her new surroundings with ease. She had first met corporate attorney David Vandiver at his Atlanta firm 4 years earlier, and the two maintained a long-distance relationship. David said she possessed wisdom far beyond her age, even though she was 20 years younger than he was. They connected instantly, sharing a similar work ethic and a dry, sharp sense of humor, and they supported each other through some very difficult personal and professional moments. David described her as poised, intelligent, and remarkably grounded. Lauren even managed to win over his fiercely protective older sister, something he noted no one else had ever managed before. What Lauren didn't know was that David had already picked out the perfect place to propose. But the strain of distance made even harder by her move eventually caused them to take a temporary break. Lauren had been dating another student named Joe, but it didn't take long for her to realize that her feelings for David were still strong and that she wanted to give their relationship another chance. Joe was deeply hurt when she ended things, but the two managed to stay good friends. By June 2011, Lauren had earned her law degree from Mercer University School of Law, one of the oldest in the nation. David, her entire family, and of course, her dog Butterbean were all there to celebrate her achievement. With graduation behind her, Lauren was ready to put her knowledge to work and dive into the next chapter of her life. The biggest hurdle ahead was passing the Georgia bar exam. So she dedicated nearly all her free time to studying. She told people she needed space to buckle down and focus on her career. After attending her sister Caitlin's wedding back in Maryland, the day became even more special for the family, as they all sensed it would be the last time they were together as a complete unit. For a while, Lauren decided to stay in Mon instead of returning to Baltimore after graduation. Like many other law students, she lived in Unit 2 on the second floor of Bars Hall, situated right across from the university. Bars Hall was intended specifically for law students, so staying there a bit longer made perfect sense. She could still meet with professors, visit the campus, and use the library while studying for the bar exam, but her quiet, comfortable apartment soon began to feel unsettling. Lauren confided in her sister about something she was convinced was happening, even though she couldn't prove it, and it sounded strange. Each time she came home from being out, she had the feeling that things inside her apartment had been moved, as if someone had been going in and out. She couldn't shake the sense that she was being watched. Yet, there were no signs of Forced entry, leaving her confused about how any of it could be happening. Her anxiety lingered, especially late at night. On June 25, 2011, she emailed David to share what had been troubling her. David tried to comfort her, suggesting it was probably just some people messing around and nothing serious. He also wondered if the stress of studying non-stop and rarely leaving her apartment might be making her a bit stir-crazy without her realizing it. Part of Lauren's group message read, "Hey guys, I'm hunkering down to study for the bar. Please don't take it personally if I don't respond to emails or texts." In the days that followed, no one heard much from her, since she spent most of her time studying, aside from going to church or working out. Occasionally, a few missed calls or unanswered messages didn't raise immediate alarm. Still, her silence stood out when her sister Caitlin and her best friend Katie tried multiple times to reach her. Caitlin found it especially strange that Lauren hadn't responded to any of the photos she'd been sending from her honeymoon. It started to feel less like she was just busy and more like something was genuinely wrong. Worried, Caitlin contacted Ashley, a fellow student, and asked her to stop by Lauren's apartment to check on her. Ashley tried calling first, but Lauren's phone suddenly went straight to voicemail. When she and her boyfriend reached the apartment, they saw Lauren's car still parked outside, using a spare key. Since Lauren was supposed to be moving out soon to live with David, they let themselves in. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Her belongings were scattered, but in a way that didn't immediately raise alarm. But then they noticed something that didn't sit right. Lauren's laptop, phone, legal textbooks, and purse were all still there. Things everyone agreed she would never leave behind. Checking her calendar, they saw she was supposed to move out the very next day, June 30th. So, where could she have gone? Ashley began calling friends and neighbors in the building, trying to track down anyone who might have seen her. Others joined the search around the area, and even Lauren's ex-boyfriend, Joe, combed the campus looking for signs of her. Some people thought she might have gone out early the next morning, and everything was fine. But the general consensus was that no one had heard from her since an end-of-year party 4 days earlier, only a few hours after that event. She had emailed David about her worries regarding the apartment. After contacting police the following morning and getting no meaningful progress, her family made the nearly 12-hour drive to Georgia to help with the search. Officers arrived at Unit 2 in Bars Hall promptly at 9 a.m. They noted that nothing seemed stolen and there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry. Still, it was immediately clear that something wasn't right. One of the first steps investigators took while examining her apartment was spraying luminol to detect any trace of blood. When they tested the bathroom, the reaction was alarmingly different. Despite the room appearing spotless, the luminol revealed that blood had once covered the bathtub. Realizing what they were dealing with, authorities shifted their focus to searching for Lauren's body on the Sweltering, windy afternoon of June 30th, they shifted their search outdoors. To regroup and consider their next steps. As they stood near a row of dumpsters, a strong gust of wind swept through and hit them with a nauseating odor. They froze immediately. There was no mistaking the smell of human decomposition. The wind shifted while we were standing there. One officer later recalled, everyone knows bad smells. But the stench of a dead or decaying body is unlike anything else. When officers lifted the dumpster lids, they were met with a gruesome sight that would haunt them forever. Inside was a black trash bag wrapped tightly around a woman's torso. Though forensic testing was still required given Lauren's disappearance and the luminal reaction in her bathroom, investigators were almost certain it was part of her remains. One officer remarked that it was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Who could commit such an act? Only a monster could do something like this. One detective remarked, the timing was almost unbelievable. If the police hadn't been parked at the entrance, the garbage collection truck would have removed everything before the search even began. Thanks to that fortunate coincidence. Testing later confirmed that the remains were indeed Lauren Giddings' torso. As expected, the chief medical examiner couldn't pinpoint an exact cause of death, but there were no obvious signs of assault. The investigation suggested that she had been killed and dismembered on June 26th. Meanwhile, Lauren's apartment, especially the bathroom, was being examined for fingerprints and other evidence, revealing that someone had attempted a meticulous cleanup. The only indication of what had happened came from the luminal. Whoever had committed the crime had clearly tried to erase all traces and had blocked off the outdoor area to keep anyone from discovering the evidence. Officers were careful not to alert anyone in the complex that Lauren had been found, fearing it might prompt the culprit to flee or hide further proof. As one detective noted, the first focus in such cases is always on those closest to the victim, either romantically or geographically. Ashley, Joe, and others involved in the initial search were brought in to provide statements. Investigators also spoke with Lauren's partner, David, who was visibly devastated. His alibi was solid. He had been away on a golf trip in California, making it clear he was not involved. Joe, Lauren's ex-boyfriend, was quickly ruled out as a suspect as authorities began narrowing down potential leads among residents. Authorities were determined to search every home on the block. Everyone was willing to cooperate except for 25-year-old Stephen McDaniel. When asked why he resisted, he explained, "It's the lawyer in me. I'm just always protective of my space." Stephen had lived next door to Lauren since their first year of law school and like her was preparing for the bar exam. He had also been present when Lauren and her friends were first reported missing. A few hours earlier, they had invited him to the station and police kept an eye on him while they continued searching the neighborhood. His behavior was suspicious. He refused to help but lingered, constantly making sure he stayed involved in everything. Stephen spent the entire day shadowing the investigation, watching everyone's movements and following officers as they entered and left homes. When the media began approaching him for interviews, he drew even more attention to himself. Stephen was one of the first to speak with police, offering his thoughts on what might have happened to Lauren. At that point, only a handful of people knew about the discovery in the dumpster. During the interview, he spent long stretches staring off into space. A few hours later, he finally allowed officers to search his apartment. Inside, they found him hoarding food, energy drinks, and an assortment of weapons. Drawers contained various items, including condoms, to which Stephen awkwardly commented that he was a virgin and saving himself for marriage. When police removed him from the scene, he began explaining that he used the dating app eHarmony, but hadn't been having much luck getting dates. When officers asked why he had the condoms, he muttered something about breaking into two nearby apartments and grabbing them randomly because he had been acting strangely. After admitting to these break-ins, police arrested him for burglary and took him in for further questioning, noting that the incidents had occurred just a short distance from Lauren's apartment. By this point, he had become almost completely silent, even though he had previously sought media attention and wanted to stay involved in the investigation. He was reluctant to answer questions, and when he did, his responses were inconsistent, mostly limited to yes, no, or I'm not sure. His behavior was unusual in other ways as well. Police noted that they had never seen anyone respond like him during an interrogation. Officers often had to ask him to make eye contact as he sat almost completely motionless, barely moving his head. The sped-up footage of the interview highlights just how bizarre his rigid posture appeared compared to the officer's normal movements. Even after investigators left the room, he continued staring straight ahead. Detective Patterson was growing increasingly frustrated, hearing nothing but no and I don't know repeated over and over. Yet Patterson was convinced that this was the person responsible for Lauren's horrific fate. Despite their suspicions, it was past midnight and they still hadn't gotten any meaningful answers. During the interview, Stephen revealed that he had 2 scratches just above his hip. Meanwhile, his apartment was being thoroughly searched. Investigators found that he had somehow acquired a master key, giving him access to every unit in the building. Among the discoveries was a pair of pants that belonged to Lauren Giddings. They also found a hacksaw and multiple flash drives which contained disturbing and explicit images and videos involving minors. His internet activity revealed that he frequently visited Lauren's social media pages, often while simultaneously searching for violent pornography. Beyond this, he had posted his twisted fantasies on forums and maintained blogs detailing the torture and murder of women. The evidence painted a chilling picture of his obsession with Lauren. Notably, one of his most recent searches included checking the garbage collection schedule for the building, an eerie connection to how her remains were later discovered in the condominium's maintenance room. Investigators discovered the hacksaw. That matched the one found in Stephen's apartment, stained with blood. CCTV footage confirmed that he had purchased it. Along with the hacksaw, a bloody sheet was recovered and returned to Lauren's belongings. Stephen was the only other person with a key to access that room, and the maintenance worker had already been ruled out. Lauren had been killed with this weapon. But why would Stephen McDaniel commit such a horrific act, and who exactly was he? His classmates described him as awkward, socially uncomfortable, and difficult to engage with. He would ask bizarre questions about death, obsess over scenarios like a zombie apocalypse, and discuss the concept of committing the perfect murder. He even tested others on how they might cover up a hypothetical killing. In fact, Stephen had been labeled by some as the student most likely to achieve notoriety. His fellow law students noted that he was always ready to argue, even when he was clearly wrong, firmly believing he was the smartest person in the room. Others said he seemed to take pleasure in debating and disagreeing with everyone, including Lauren. It was clear that making friends wasn't his goal. One classmate described him as an average student, a sentiment echoed by their professors. He wasn't particularly remarkable academically, but his voice and mannerisms made him stand out. As his time at university drew to a close, he seemed uncertain about his next steps. He had no close friends and no clear plans for the future. As he neared the end of school, he seemed somewhat adrift. Lauren had made a genuine effort to befriend him and offer support when they became neighbors in 2008. Noticing how he often hurried around the complex alone, she even introduced him to her mother, Karen, the night before graduation. Karen would encounter him again later. She recalled feeling that there was something unsettling about him. During their second conversation, she couldn't shake the thought of him living next to Lauren. He always kept the windows and curtains closed, which I found strange, she said. Despite Lauren's consistent kindness, he managed to make her feel uneasy, evoking the same discomfort he had in others. Most people were unaware. But Lauren had spoken about Stephen's behavior and their clashes in class. In an email to David in 2008, the year she moved in, she wrote, "I got the stink. He's trying to harm me." Despite this, Stephen had clearly fixated on Lauren, repeatedly asking her out, though she wasn't interested, especially while in a relationship. From then on, she made a point to keep her distance, offering only polite courtesy when their paths crossed. On August 2, 2011, Stephen McDaniel was formally charged with Lauren Giddings' murder based on the evidence collected. He was later hit with 7 additional counts of child exploitation. His lawyers requested $100,000 bail, but the court set it at over $1 million. Following a thorough examination of his devices, a grand jury ultimately indicted him on 30 counts of child exploitation. In addition to the murder charge, the prosecution emphasized that even with the substantial evidence against him, the case remained largely circumstantial. His DNA wasn't found on the hacksaw or anywhere in the bathroom, leaving the pants as the only physical link tying him to her, similar to how he had tried to explain away the condoms. He could still claim the pants were simply something he had taken, and investigators had yet to firmly determine either the motive or the exact time of death. Even so, they felt confident and ready to take him to trial. That confidence only grew when new evidence emerged. A video recovered from a memory card stolen from his apartment revealed that Stephen had been secretly watching Lauren for a long time. She had every reason to fear someone watching her or attempting to break in. On the night she was killed, he had been recording her house through a window by fastening a camera to the end of a wooden pole. He raised it high enough to peer through the blinds and into her room. After seeing the footage, prosecutor David Cook stated plainly, "That's the man responsible for Lauren's funeral." A few days later, St. Mary of the Mills Church filled with hundreds of mourners. They could only lay her torso to rest as all search efforts had recovered nothing else. While the community grieved, Stephen McDaniel entered a not guilty plea, and the defense prepared a narrative claiming that police had orchestrated a conspiracy against him, breaking into his apartment multiple times to plant evidence. In an unexpected twist, one of Lauren's professors, a mentor in a course designed to help students transition from law school to practice, had briefly worked with Stephen as one of his defense attorneys. He admitted that while he had enjoyed teaching Lauren and admired her, he remembered her opposition to the death penalty. With that in mind, he advocated for dismissing the death penalty option, even as the prosecution was pushing to pursue it. With guidance from his lawyers, Stephen eventually reconsidered. When the prosecution agreed to drop the child exploitation charges and offered a plea deal, he entered a guilty plea in April 2014, just 1 week before his trial was set to begin for the murder and dismemberment of Lauren Giddings, bringing a close to what had been a long and painful case. According to one of his former attorneys, McDaniel's situation worsened as digital evidence continued to emerge. Faced with the growing body of material from his computer and camera, he ultimately decided it was only a matter of time before a conviction would be secured, even before his sentencing date. Prior to sentencing, the prosecution presented evidence illustrating his character. They read excerpts from Stephen's forum posts and played recordings from Lauren's house. Among the disturbing posts was one that read, "I received my law degree. Drink alone in front of my computer and party hard. Watch my attractive classmate neighbor arrive home late. Ask her to join you for a nightcap. Make her a Mickey Finn, a spiked drink designed to knock someone out. She's completely unconscious. Finally, I lost my V-card. She died after overdosing. Oh no. I celebrated losing my V-card by barbecuing her arms and legs. I tossed out the rest of her body. But I wasn't into the organ meat. LOL. All while the police are recovering her remains. It's on the news. Virgins, are you insane? But the authenticity of this post was questioned. Some believed it was nothing more than internet trolling. And although prosecutors were convinced he wrote it, debate still lingers. As part of his plea deal, he had to stand before the court and explain what happened that day. And this is what he described. Using the master key, he entered her apartment around 4:30 a.m. dressed in black and wearing gloves and a mask. He said that while he stood watching her sleep, she seemed to sense something was wrong and suddenly woke up. Before she could react or understand what was happening, he lunged at her and wrapped his hands around her throat. They struggled and fell to the floor. He claimed Lauren managed to grab his mask and pull it off, shouting his name and begging him to stop once she realized who he was. He continued strangling her for roughly 15 minutes as she fought and cried until she finally stopped breathing. Afterward, he dragged her into the bathroom, left her in the bathtub for the rest of the night, and the following day, he still left her there. He came back on the evening of June 27 with tools, including a hacksaw, and carried out the dismemberment, describing the process in disturbing detail. According to him, he placed different parts of her body into separate bags and scattered them in trash cans around the university campus, believing the garbage would be collected. Soon, he left her torso in the bin beside their apartment building. He ripped up his gloves, shirt, and mask, flushing the pieces down the toilet to destroy evidence. Stephen insisted he had not sexually assaulted Lauren, and the medical examiner found no signs of such an attack. He said he never removed the pink running shorts she was wearing when she died. And indeed, they were found still on her torso. He testified in court, and even after nearly 3 years, many still struggled to grasp the reality of what he had done. Stephen acknowledged that Lauren had always been kind and considerate toward him from the moment they met. He claimed he had been in a hazy, detached state since the night of the murder, convincing himself for a time that she was still alive. I can't fully explain why I killed Lauren, or why I tried to conceal it the way I did, he said. I know it was profoundly wrong. I'm not delusional, nor am I without morals or decency. There must be some explanation in my physiology, psychology, or neurology. Perhaps something unique to me. He expressed remorse to her family, saying he missed Lauren every day, but made no request for forgiveness. I can never deserve it, he admitted. I would go back and change what happened, he said. Lauren's firm opposition to the death penalty was the only reason prosecutors chose not to seek it. Her family acknowledged this, but made clear they hoped he would spend the rest of his life in prison under the harshest conditions possible. Stephen McDaniel was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole until 2041. After sentencing, he sent a lengthy letter from prison claiming he had been intimidated by police and that his trial had been unfair from the start. He demanded a new trial that he believed would be just. 4 years later, he filed an appeal, representing himself and bringing in over 10 witnesses, including His former attorney, whom he was now suing for malpractice. In his lawsuit, Stephen requested $50,000 to cover legal fees and an additional $250,000 in punitive damages, alleging negligence on the part of his lawyer. Additionally, he filed a motion claiming that Howard Sims, the Bibb County judge, had discriminated against him. However, his appeal was denied in 2022. Now 37, he filed another appeal, alleging that his attorneys were incompetent, that the prosecution had withheld documents, and that his rights had been violated. He sought both release from prison and reversal of his conviction. "We just hope the truth comes out," added Mark, Stephen's father, who supported the process. Unfortunately, because McDaniel filed the appeal more than a year late, the judge ruled that it could not even be considered and rejected it. The judge noted that with reasonable diligence, McDaniel would have realized his request was premature instead of naively blaming the Georgia Supreme Court. The case remains ongoing, with Stephen having already filed yet another appeal. His father even set up a GoFundMe to help cover legal fees, but it attracted no donations and was quickly taken down. Some of his family and friends continued to assert his innocence. Caitlin, Lauren's sister, called their claims pathetic and delusional. Before his death, his grandfather, Hollis, gave an interview, reflecting on visiting him in prison. "I guess I'm a broken-hearted grandfather," Hollis said. "If all that the police have is true, he just sits there quietly when you go in, and you can't get anything out of him. You want to take him to a doctor, but he's not a little child anymore. He's grown. It just breaks your heart. Whether you like it or not, you have to face the reality in front of you." One relative said, "I got him a lawyer immediately because I thought it was the right thing to do. I assumed that once he posted bail, he'd go home, but when I saw him, my God, he just looked different." Glenda, his mother, also defended him, firmly believing in his innocence at the time of his arrest. She said she even dreamed of him serving on the Supreme Court. "I'll give him a big hug when he gets out. And he has one for me," she said. Yet, from the perspective of the police, prosecutors, and Lauren's family, the case had been settled long ago. The right verdict had been reached years prior, regardless of his reclusive nature. Caitlin Lawrence, Lauren's sister, remarked that she might have been one of the few who treated him with genuine kindness and attention. She emphasized that teaching children to be cautious or to lock their cars is not the point. There was nothing she or anyone else could have done to prevent what happened. People should always treat others with respect and compassion. You should show kindness to your neighbors regardless of appearances. Usually that's enough, but in this case he was different. Investigators believe that day they prevented a predator, a potential serial killer, and a danger to children. Once seen as a student most likely to become famous, he is now infamous for committing one of the most horrific crimes the town has ever known. Police acknowledged that the case could easily have gone cold and that Stephen might never have been caught if the garbage collection had emptied the bin where Lauren's torso was discovered. They praised her family and friends for acting swiftly. Investigators also suspect there's more to the story and that Stephen has never fully disclosed what happened. Detective David Patterson remarked, "I'm certain there are things he'll never tell anyone. We know she's dead, but we really can't trust anything." Stephen McDaniel says. Lauren's sister Sarah added, "He doesn't strike me as an honest person. In my opinion, he can fabricate a million stories and picture them in vivid detail." Authorities continue searching for the rest of Lauren's remains, believing they may be located on a 62-acre property owned by one of Stephen's relatives. Legal experts agree that even though he becomes eligible for parole in 2041, he will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Lauren's family continues to honor her memory, marking every milestone and special occasion as if she were still present. They also organize runs in her honor. Her sister Caitlin named her daughter Lauren Magnolia as a tribute in Mon. 2 memorials commemorate her life. One at Mercer Law School and another on a pink bench in Washington Park in the downtown district where she loved to run. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.